Every single morning, at exactly 6:45, a black Mercedes would pull up to the front of a luxury penthouse in Manhattan. The driver would step out and stand by the door, waiting in silence. He never checked his phone. He never leaned against the car. He just stood there, with his hands folded in front of him like a soldier waiting for orders. His name was Raymond, and he had been doing this same routine for 7 long years. 7 years of waking up at 5 in the morning, 7 years of driving through the chaos of New York traffic, 7 years of opening doors and carrying bags and saying yes ma'am and no ma'am, and in all those 7 years, the woman he worked for had never once asked him a single question about his life. Not one. Her name was Evelyn, and she was the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the city. She was powerful and she was wealthy, and she was always in a hurry. The moment she stepped into that car, every morning her eyes would go straight to her phone, emails, meetings, deals. That was her whole world. Raymond would glance at her in the rearview mirror. Sometimes he would see her typing away with her perfectly manicured nails. He would hear her talking on the phone in that sharp voice she used when she meant business. But she never looked up. She never noticed him watching to her. He was just part of the car. Just another thing that got her from one place to another. He was invisible, and the truth is Raymond had gotten used to it, had learned how to disappear. He had learned how to make himself small and quiet and forgettable, because that was safer, that was easier. You see, Raymond had not always been a driver. There was a time in his life when people knew his name. There was a time when he walked into rooms and everyone turned to look. There was a time when his fingers could make a piano sing in ways that brought grown men to tears. But that was a long time ago. That was a different life when Raymond was just a little boy growing up on the south side of Chicago. His mother noticed something special about him. She worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. But every Sunday she would take him to church, and in that church there was an old piano sitting in the corner. It was out of tune, and some of the keys were chipped. But to Raymond, it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. One Sunday, when he was only 5 years old, he walked up to that piano and started pressing the keys. At first it was just noise, random sounds, but then something happened. His tiny fingers started finding patterns. They started finding melodies. The whole church went quiet. His mother stood in the back with her hand over her mouth and tears rolling down her cheeks. She knew right then that her son had a gift. From that day on, she did everything she could to help him grow that gift. She saved every extra penny she earned. She skipped meals so she could pay for piano lessons. She took 3 buses across the city to find the best teacher who would work with a kid from their neighborhood, and Raymond did not let her down. He practiced every single day. He practiced until his fingers ached. He practiced until the sun went down and came back up again. By the time he was 12 years old, he was winning competitions all over the state. By 14, he was being called a prodigy. By 15, something incredible happened. Raymond got invited to perform at Carnegie Hall in New York City. Carnegie Hall, that is the place where legends play. That is the place where the greatest musicians in the world have stood on stage and made history. And there was Ramonda, 15-year-old kid from the south side of Chicago, standing backstage with his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst out of his chest. His mother was there with him. She was wearing her best dress, the same dress she wore to church every Sunday. She held his face in her hands and looked into his eyes. She told him that no matter what happened out there, she was already the proudest mother in the whole world. She told him that his gift was not just for him. It was for everyone who would ever hear him play. She told him to go out there and give them everything he had, and he did. That night, Raymond played like he had never played before. His fingers moved across the keys like they had a life of their own. The music filled that massive hall and wrapped around every single person sitting in those velvet seats. When he finished the last note, there was a moment of complete silence, and then the whole place exploded. People were on their feet. People were cheering. People were crying. Raymond looked out at the crowd, and he could not believe what was happening. He looked over at his mother in the front row. and she was smiling bigger than he had ever seen her smile. That was the happiest night of his life. Everything seemed possible. Everything seemed bright. He had scholarship offers coming in from the best music schools in the country. He had agents calling, wanting to represent him. Had a future that most people could only dream of. But life has a way of changing everything in a single moment. 2 years later, on a cold winter night, Raymond and his mother were driving home from a concert. It was late and the roads were icy. His mother was behind the wheel, talking about how proud she was of him. She was making plans for his future. She was laughing about something funny that happened backstage. And then out of nowhere, a truck came sliding through a red light. Raymond saw the headlights. He heard his mother scream, and then everything went black. When he woke up, he was in a hospital bed. His whole body was wrapped in bandages. Doctors and nurses were standing around him with looks on their faces that told him something terrible had happened. Tried to speak, but no words came out. He tried to move, but pain shot through every part of his body. And then someone told him the news that would break him forever. His mother did not survive the crash. She was gone. The woman who had believed in him more than anyone. The woman who had sacrificed everything for his dream. The woman who had held his face in her hands and told him his gift belonged to the world. She was gone. Raymond did not even get to say goodbye for weeks. He lay in that hospital bed staring at the ceiling. He did not eat. He did not speak. He did not care if he lived or died. But that was not the only thing the accident took from him. The doctors finally removed the bandages from his left hand. Raymond saw something that made his heart stop. His hand was destroyed. The bones had been shattered in so many places they had to put metal rods and screws just to hold it together. His fingers were twisted and stiff. He could barely move them. Doctors told him he might regain some basic function with years of physical therapy, but playing piano at a professional level that was over. His dream died in that hospital room right next to the memory of his mother. Raymond spent the next few years just trying to survive. He went through surgery after surgery. He did physical therapy until he wanted to scream from the pain. Slowly, he got some movement back in his hand. He could hold things, he could write, he could do normal everyday tasks, but every time he looked at a piano, something inside him broke all over again. He could not bring himself to touch the keys, because every note reminded him of her. Every melody brought back her voice. Every chord brought back that night, so he stopped playing, packed away his music. He packed away his awards and his photographs and everything that reminded him of who he used to be. And he started over. He took whatever jobs he could find. He worked as a janitor. He worked as a security guard. He worked at a warehouse loading boxes. And then one day, he saw an ad for a driver position at a fancy company in Manhattan. He applied and he got the job. That was 7 years ago. 7 years of driving a woman who never once looked at him as anything more than hired. Help 7 years of hiding the scars on his hand beneath black driving gloves. 7 years of being invisible. And Raymond told himself that was okay. He told himself the chapter of his life was closed. He told himself some dreams are not meant to come true, but deep down in a place he tried to ignore, there was still a voice that sounded just like his mother telling him that his gift was not his to hide, telling him that it belonged to the world. Heard that voice every single day, and every single day he pushed it down and kept driving. It was a cold November evening, and the rain was coming down so hard you could barely see 10 feet in front of you. Raymond sat in the driver's seat of the Mercedes waiting outside the company headquarters. He had the heat on low and the wipers going back and forth, trying to keep the windshield clear inside the building. He knew something big was happening tonight. Was the annual charity gala. This was the event Evelyn had been planning for months. Every year she hosted this massive party at one of the fanciest venues in Manhattan. 300 of the most powerful people in New York would be there. Business executives and celebrities and politicians and old money families who had more wealth than most people could even imagine. It Was the kind of event where a single handshake could be worth millions. The kind of event where reputations were made and broken, and Evelyn took it very seriously. She had spent a fortune on decorations and catering and entertainment. She had hired one of the most famous pianists in the world to perform a man who had played for presidents and kings, a man who charged $200,000 for a single night. Everything was supposed to be perfect, but Raymond could tell something was wrong the moment Evelyn came rushing out of the building. She was on her phone, and her voice was different. It was not the calm, controlled voice she usually had. It was sharp and panicked and almost breaking. She threw open the back door of the car and climbed in without even waiting for Raymond to get out and open it for her. That had never happened. The 4 and 7 years, she had never once opened her own door. Raymond pulled out into traffic and headed toward the venue. Through the rearview mirror, he could see Evelyn gripping her phone so tight her knuckles were turning white. She was making call after call after call, and every conversation ended the same way, with her saying words that Raymond had never heard her say before. Please, I am begging you. I will pay anything between calls. She would let out these frustrated sounds like she was trying not to scream. Raymond kept his eyes on the road and his mouth shut. He had learned a long time ago that his job was to drive, not to ask questions. But then Evelyn made one more call, and this time he heard everything. She was talking to someone on her team, and what she said made Raymond understand just how bad things had gotten. The pianist had canceled 2 hours before the event. 2 hours before 300 of the most important people in the city would walk into that ballroom expecting to hear world-class music, and now there was nothing. The guy had some kind of family emergency and got on a plane back to Europe. There was no backup plan. There was no replacement. Evelyn was telling her assistant to find someone, anyone, who could fill in. She was saying she did not care if they had to pull someone off the street corner. She was saying her entire reputation was on the line. She was saying this could not be happening. When she hung up the phone, she sat back in her seat and closed her eyes. For a moment, she looked like a completely different person. Not the powerful CEO who commanded rooms full of executives. Just a woman who was watching everything fall apart. Raymond glanced at her in the mirror. He saw the stress on her face. He saw the way her hands were shaking, and something inside him started to stir. It was a feeling he had not felt in a very long time. It started in his chest like a small flame. Then it moved down to his hands. His fingers twitched against the steering wheel, almost like they remembered something his brain had tried to forget. He thought about that old piano in the church back in Chicago. He thought about the way the keys felt under his fingertips. He thought about his mother standing in the back of that church with tears in her eyes. He thought about what she always used to tell him, that his gift was not his to hide, that it belonged to the world. For 20 years, Raymond had been running from that gift. He had buried it so deep he thought it was gone forever. But right now, sitting in this car, listening to this woman panic over a missing pianist, realized it had never really gone away. It was still there waiting. The car pulled up to the venue, and Raymond could see the chaos through the window. Staff members were running around. People were on phones. Everyone looked like they were about to lose their minds. He put the car in park and sat there for a moment. His heart was pounding. His palms were sweating. There was a war going on inside his head. One voice was telling him to stay quiet, stay invisible, do not get involved. That voice reminded him of all the pain that came with playing. It reminded him of the accident. It reminded him of his mother. It told him that some doors are meant to stay closed. But there was another voice, a softer voice, a voice that sounded like her. That voice was asking him a question. How long are you going to keep hiding? How long are you going to pretend you are not who you really are? Raymond took a deep breath, and he did something he had never done in 7 years of working for this woman. He turned around in his seat and looked directly at her. Evelyn was still sitting there with her eyes closed. She had no idea what was about to happen. Raymond cleared his throat. Ma'am, she opened her eyes and looked at him with an expression that said she was surprised he even knew how to speak. What is it? Her voice was tired and irritated. She clearly was not in the mood for whatever her driver had to say. Raymond felt his throat go dry. Every instinct in his body was telling him to turn back around and forget this whole thing. But he pushed through. "I can play." The words came out quieter than he meant them to. Evelyn stared at him like he had just spoken a foreign language. "Excuse me." "The piano." Raymond swallowed hard. "Can play the piano." For a long moment, Evelyn just looked at him. Her eyes moved up and down like she was seeing him for the first time, like she was trying to figure out if this was some kind of joke. Yes, ma'am, you play piano." Raymond nodded. "I used to a long time ago." Evelyn let out a short laugh. It was not a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh people make when they think someone has lost their mind. She shook her head and reached for her phone again. "I appreciate whatever this is, but I need a real pianist." Nod. A driver who took lessons as a kid. Raymond felt something rise up in his chest. It was not anger exactly. It was something deeper, something that had been sleeping for 20 years. "With respect, ma'am, I did not just take lessons. I performed at Carnegie Hall when I was 15 years old." Evelyn stopped moving. Her hand froze halfway to her phone. She turned and looked at him again. This time her eyes were different. There was confusion in them, and maybe just a little bit of curiosity. "Carnegie Hall." Raymond nodded. "I was a different person back then. Things happened and I had to walk away from that life. But I still remember how to play. I remember every note." Evelyn studied his face for what felt like forever. Raymond could see her thinking. He could see her calculating the risk. She was desperate. She had no other options. But putting her driver on stage in front of 300 of the most powerful people in the city, that was insane. Finally, she spoke. "If you get up there and embarrass me in front of everyone, I know, do not bother coming to work on Monday." "Do you understand?" Raymond understood perfectly. He was risking his job. He was risking the only stable thing he had in his life. But he was also being given a chance he never thought he would get again. "Yes, ma'am, I understand." Evelyn took a deep breath and looked out the window at the chaos unfolding inside the venue. Then she turned back to him. "You have one song, one chance. Do not make me regret this." She opened her door and stepped out into the rain. Raymond sat there alone for a moment. His hands were trembling. His heart was beating so fast he could hear it in his ears. He looked down at his left hand, the one that had been shattered in the accident, the one with the scars hidden under his driving gloves. Slowly pulled off the glove and looked at his fingers. They were crooked and stiff. The skin was marked with lines where the surgeons had cut him open again and again. For 20 years this hand had been a reminder of everything he lost. But tonight maybe could become something else. Raymond closed his eyes and thought about his mother. He thought about her smile. He thought about her voice. He thought about the last thing she ever said to him. "Go out there and give them everything you have." He opened his eyes. "Okay, Mama," he whispered to himself. "One more time." Then he opened his door and stepped out into the rain. Raymond walked through the back entrance of the venue and stepped into a world he did not belong in. The ballroom was massive. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. The walls were covered in gold, and velvet waiters in white jackets moved through the crowd carrying trays of champagne that probably cost more than Raymond made in a week. And the people looked like they had stepped out of a magazine. Women in gowns that sparkled under the lights, men in tuxedos that were tailored to perfection, diamonds and watches and jewelry. Everywhere you looked, these were the kind of people who owned buildings with their names on them. The kind of people who flew on private jets and had summer homes in places Raymond could not even pronounce. And here he was walking through them in his driver uniform, black suit, black tie, shoes that were polished but worn. Nobody paid him any attention to them. He was just another staff member, just another invisible person there to serve. Raymond kept his head down and made his way toward the front of the room, and that is when he saw it. The piano. It was a Steinway grand. the most beautiful instrument he had ever laid eyes on. It sat on a small stage at the front of the ballroom. The wood was so shiny he could see the reflection of the chandeliers in it. The keys were perfect, white and black. Waiting, Raymond felt his chest tighten. For 20 years he had avoided pianos. He would walk past music stores without looking in the windows. He would change the channel when piano music came on the television. He had trained himself to pretend they did not exist. But now here he was, walking toward one, about to sit down and play in front of 300 strangers. His legs felt heavy. Each step was harder than the last. Voice in his head was screaming at him to turn around, to run, to get back in the car and drive away and forget this whole thing ever happened. He kept walking. He thought about his mother. He thought about the promise he made in the car. More time. Mama, one more time. When Raymond reached the stage, he could feel eyes starting to turn toward him. Few people near the front noticed him climbing the steps. They looked confused. Who was this man in the driver uniform? Why was he going near the piano? Whispers started to spread through the crowd. Raymond could hear bits and pieces. Is that the valet? What is he doing? Is this some kind of joke? He tried to block it all out. He walked across the stage and stood in front of the piano bench. For a moment he just stared at the keys. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. His hands were shaking, the left one more than the right. He looked out at the crowd and saw Evelyn standing at the back of the room. Her arms were crossed, hers tight with tension. She looked like a woman who was either about to witness a miracle or a complete disaster, and she had no idea which one it would be. Raymond took a deep breath and sat down on the bench. The whispers in the crowd grew louder. People were starting to point. Some were laughing quietly. Others were looking around for security. They thought this was a mistake. They thought someone had let the help wander onto the stage. Raymond placed his hands on his lap and closed his eyes. He tried to remember the last time he sat at a piano. It was the night before the accident. Had been practicing at home. His mother was in the kitchen making dinner. He could smell her cooking. While he played, she had come into the room and stood behind him with her hands on his shoulders. She told him he was going to do great things. She told him the world was waiting for him. That was the last normal night of his life. The next day, everything changed. Raymond opened his eyes. He slowly reached up and removed his driving gloves. First the right hand, then the left. He heard a few gasps from the people sitting closest to the stage. They could see his scars, twisted fingers, the lines where the surgeons had pieced him back together. He placed his hands on the keys. The ivory felt cool under his fingertips, familiar like. Coming home after being gone for a lifetime, the room had gone quiet now. Even the people who were laughing had stopped. Everyone was watching, waiting. Raymond took one more breath, and then he played the first note. It rang out across the ballroom like a bell, clear and pure and perfect. The sound hung in the air for just a moment. In that moment, something shifted. Raymond could feel it. The whole room could feel it. Then he played the second note and the third, and suddenly his fingers were moving on their own. 20 years of silence melted away. 20 years of pain and hiding and pretending. All of it disappeared, and the music came flooding back. He was playing Chopin, the same piece he had performed at Carnegie Hall when he was 15 years old. Ballade Number 1 in G minor. It starts slow and gentle, like a story being whispered in the dark. The notes climb and fall like waves. On a quiet shore, Raymond let his body remember what his mind had tried to forget. His fingers found the keys without him having to think. Melody poured out of him like water from a broken dam. In the crowd, people had stopped moving. Champagne glasses were frozen halfway to lips. Conversations died in the middle of sentences. Everyone was staring at the man on stage. The driver, the invisible man, who was now filling the room with the most beautiful sound they had ever heard. A woman in the front row brought her hand to her mouth. Tears were already forming in her eyes. She did not know who this man was. She did not know his story, but something in the music was speaking to her, something true and raw and human. As Raymond played, the piece grew more Intense, the notes came faster, the melody twisted and turned. There were moments of darkness in the music, pain and loss and grief. You could hear it in every chord. This was not just a performance. This was a confession. Raymond was telling his story through the keys. He was telling the world about the boy who had everything, about the mother who believed in him, about the night that took it all away, about the 20 years of silence that followed, and about this moment, right now, when he finally found the courage to play again. The music built and built. Raymond could feel tears running down his own face. He did not try to stop them. He let everything out, every emotion he had buried for 2 decades. It all came pouring through his fingers onto those black and white keys in the back of the room. Evelyn had not moved. Her arms had fallen to her sides. Her champagne glass had slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor, but she did not notice. She could not take her eyes off the man on stage, the man she had treated like furniture for 7 years, the man she had never once looked at as a human being. Now he was showing her something she would never forget. As Raymond approached the final section of the piece, the whole room seemed to hold its breath. The notes slowed down, the melody became soft again, until like a goodbye, like a prayer. Raymond thought about his mother one last time. He could almost see her standing beside the piano, smiling, and him the way she used to. He played the final notes with everything he had left. Each one was a tribute to her. Each one was a thank you for believing in me, for sacrificing everything, for giving me this gift. The last note faded into silence, and for a moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. The ballroom was completely still. Raymond sat at the piano with his head bowed, his hands resting on the keys, tears falling onto his lap. 3 seconds passed, then 5, then the room exploded. Every single person jumped to their feet. The applause was deafening. People were cheering and shouting and crying. The woman in the front row was sobbing openly. Men in expensive suits were wiping their eyes. Even the waiters had stopped to watch and were clapping along with everyone else. Raymond looked up at the crowd. He could not believe what he was seeing. All these powerful people, all these millionaires and executives and celebrities standing and clapping for him. The driver, the invisible man. He looked toward the back of the room and found Evelyn. She was still standing in the same spot, but everything about her was different. Her face was covered in tears. Her mouth was open, but no words were coming out. For the first time in her life, she was completely speechless. Raymond looked at her and gave a small nod. Just a simple acknowledgement. I told you I could play. Their applause went on for what felt like forever. People started pushing toward the stage. Everyone wanted to know who he was. Everyone wanted to shake his hand. Everyone wanted to understand how a driver could play like that. But Raymond just sat there looking at the piano, feeling something he had not felt in 20 years. Peace. He had finally done it. Had finally let his gift out into the world, just like his mother always wanted. And somewhere up there, he knew she was smiling. The applause would not stop. It kept going and going, like waves crashing on a beach that did not know how to be still. Raymond sat at the piano bench, feeling like he was in some kind of dream. His whole body was trembling. His fingers were still resting on the keys. He could not make himself move. All around him, people were pushing forward, trying to get closer to the stage. They were calling out to him, "Who are you? What is your name? Where did you come from? How did you learn to play like that?" The questions blended together into one big wall of noise. Raymond did not know how to answer any of them. He had spent 20 years being invisible. He had spent 20 years avoiding attention. And now suddenly everyone in the room wanted a piece of him. Man in an expensive gray suit climbed onto the stage and grabbed Raymond by the shoulder. He was shouting something about record deals and concerts and money. A woman in a red dress pushed the man aside and started asking if Raymond had representation. Someone else was holding up a phone, trying to record everything. It was chaos. Raymond felt like he was drowning. He needed air. He needed space. He needed to get away from all these people who 5 minutes ago did not even know he existed, and then through the crowd he saw her. Evelyn. She was pushing her way toward the stage. Her face was still wet with tears. Her perfect makeup was ruined. She looked nothing like the powerful CEO who barked orders at him every morning. She looked like a woman who had just seen something that shook her to her core. The crowd parted for her because that is what crowds do when someone important is coming through. She climbed the steps to the stage and walked straight toward Raymond. The noise around them seemed to fade all. The people shouting and grabbing and recording, it all became background static. Evelyn stood in front of him. For a long moment she did not say anything. She just looked at him, really looked at him. Maybe for the first time ever Raymond could see her trying to find words. He could see her mouth opening and closing, but nothing came out. Finally, after what felt like forever, she spoke. Why her? Voice cracked on that single word. Why did you never tell me? Raymond looked at her and felt something strange. He was not angry. He was not bitter. He was just tired of hiding, tired of pretending, tired of being someone he was not. You never asked. The words came out soft and simple. Evelyn flinched like he had slapped her. It was the truth, and they both knew it. 7 years of sitting in that car together, 7 years of him opening her door and carrying her bags and driving her through the city, and she had never once asked him a single question about his life. She had never wondered if he had dreams or talents or a story worth telling to her. He had just been the driver, a tool, service, not a human being. Evelyn took a shaky breath. Can we talk somewhere quiet? Raymond nodded. They made their way off the stage and through a side door that led to a small private room. It was some kind of office with a desk and a few chairs. Evelyn closed the door behind them, and the noise from the ballroom disappeared. For a moment they just stood there in the silence. Then Evelyn sat down in one of the chairs, like her legs could not hold her up anymore. She looked at Raymond with eyes that were searching for answers. Tell me, please, I need to understand. Raymond leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. He had not told this story to anyone in a very long time, but something about tonight had broken down all the walls he had built around himself, so he started talking. He told her about growing up on the south side of Chicago, about his mother working 2 jobs just to keep them alive, about that old piano in the church, and how he fell in love with music the first time he touched those keys. He told her about the lessons and the practice and the competitions, about being called a prodigy when he was just a kid who loved to play. He told her about Carnegie Hall, about standing on that stage at 15 years old with his heart pounding and his mother watching from the front row, about the standing ovation that changed his life. Evelyn listened without interrupting. Her eyes never left his face. Raymond kept going. He told her about the scholarships and the agents and all the doors that were opening for him, about the future that seemed so bright. He could barely look at it, and then his voice got quieter. He told her about the accident, about that cold winter night when everything fell apart, about the truck that came out of nowhere, about waking up in the hospital and learning that his mother was gone, about the damage to his hand that ended his career. Before it really began, when he talked about his mother, his voice broke. He had to stop for a moment and collect himself. The grief was still there after all these years. It had never gone away. It had just been buried under layers of silence and routine. Evelyn had tears streaming down her face again. She did not try to wipe them away. She just let them fall. Raymond told her about the years that followed, the surgeries and the therapy and the slow, painful process of learning to use his hand again, about giving up on music because every note reminded him of his mother, about taking whatever jobs he could find just to survive, about becoming a driver because it was steady work and he did not have to think too much, about learning to be invisible because it was easier than being seen. When he finished talking, the room was completely silent. Evelyn sat there with her head in her hands. She was crying in a way Raymond had never seen a powerful person cry before. These were not polite tears. These were the kind of tears that come from somewhere deep inside, the kind that shake your whole body. After a while, she looked up at him. I I'm so sorry. Raymond shook his head. You did not know. That is exactly it. Evelyn stood up and walked toward him. I did not know because I never bothered to find out. 7 years, Raymond, 7 years. You have been driving me around the city, and I never once saw you as a person. I never asked about your family or your dreams or what you do when you go home at night. I treated you like you were part of the car, like you did not matter. That is not your fault. That is mine. Raymond did not know what to say. He had expected a lot of things from tonight, but this was not one of them. He had expected to play his song and fade back into the background. He had expected things to go back to normal. But looking at Evelyn now, he could see that nothing was ever going to be normal again. She reached out and took his left hand in both of hers. She looked at the scars, the crooked fingers, the evidence of everything he had been through. How did you do it? She whispered. How did you play like that with a hand like this? Raymond looked down at their hands together. I do not know. I just let my mother guide me. I guess I closed my eyes and pretended she was there with me. Played for her tonight. Not for the crowd. Not for you. For her. Evelyn held his hand tighter. She was the one who believed in you. Raymond nodded. She was the only one who ever did. She gave up everything for Mesh, worked herself to the bone, so I could have piano lessons. She never bought anything for herself. Every extra dollar went toward my future, and I never got to pay her back. I never got to make her proud the way she deserved. Evelyn shook her head. You did make her proud tonight. You made her proud. Whatever you believe about what comes after this life, I promise you, she saw what you did out there. She heard every note, and she's proud of you. Raymond felt something crack open inside his chest. He had been holding on to so much pain for so long, so much guilt, so much regret. He had convinced himself that his mother died before he could show her what he could become. But maybe Evelyn was right. Maybe somehow she already knew. Maybe she had always known for the first time in 20 years. Raymond let himself cry. Without trying to stop, I stood there in that small room with his boss holding his scarred hand, and he let it all out, all the grief, all the loss, all the years of pretending to be okay when he was falling apart inside. Evelyn did not say anything. She just stood there with him, being present, being human for those few minutes. They were not a CEO and a driver. They were just two people sharing a moment of real connection. When Raymond finally pulled himself together, he looked at Evelyn with new eyes. She was not the cold, powerful woman he had spent 7 years resenting. She was just a persona, person who had made mistakes, a person who was capable of changing. Thank you, he said quietly, for giving me a chance tonight. I know it was a risk. Evelyn smiled through her tears. It was the best risk I ever took. She paused and looked at him seriously. What happens now? What do you want to do? Raymond thought about the question for so long. He had not allowed himself to want anything. He had just existed day after day, going through the motions. But tonight something had changed. The door he thought was closed forever had cracked open, and for the first time he could see a little bit of light on the other side. I do not know, he admitted. I have not thought about the future in a very long time. Evelyn nodded. Well, when you figure it out, let me know. Whatever it is, I want to help. Raymond looked at her. Why? Because I owe you, Evelyn said simply. 7 years of being invisible, 7 years of me not seeing you. I cannot give you that time back, but I can make sure the next 7 years are different. Raymond did not know if he believed her. People said things in emotional moments that they did not always follow through on, but something in her eyes told him she meant it. Okay, he said, we will see what happens. Evelyn gave his hand one final squeeze. Then she let go and walked toward the door. She stopped with her hand on the handle and turned back. Raymond, yeah, you are not my driver anymore. You are my friend. Then she opened the door and walked back into the chaos of the ballroom. Raymond stood alone in that small room, thinking about everything that had just happened, thinking about his mother, thinking about the music that had finally come back to him, thinking about the woman who had finally seen him. He did not know what the future held, but for the first time in 20 years, he was actually curious to find out. Raymond woke up the next morning in his small apartment on the edge of the city. For a moment, he thought the whole thing had been a dream. The ballroom, the piano, the applause, the conversation with Evelyn. It all seemed too strange to be real. But then he looked at his phone and saw 147 missed calls. His voicemail was full. His text messages were overflowing. People he had not talked to in years were suddenly trying to reach him. What in the world is happening? He sat up in bed and started scrolling through his notifications. That is when he saw it. Someone at the gala had recorded his entire performance on their phone. They had posted it online with a caption that said, "The driver who brought the CEO to tears." The video had been shared thousands of times overnight. By the time Raymond woke up, it had already been viewed by over 2 million people, and the number was climbing every minute. Raymond watched himself on that tiny screen. He watched his scarred hands move across the keys. He watched the crowd go silent. He watched Evelyn drop her champagne glass. He watched people cry. It was surreal, like watching a stranger who happened to look exactly like him. His phone started ringing again. He did not recognize the number, but something told him to answer it. "Hello? Is this Raymond?" The voice on the other end was professional and excited. "Yes, this is him. My name is Daniel, and I work for one of the biggest music labels in the country. I saw your video this morning, and I have to tell you, in 30 years of doing this job, I have never seen anything like it. We want to talk to you about your future." Raymond almost left his future yesterday. His future was driving a car and opening doors. Now strangers were calling him about record deals. He told the man he needed time to think. Then he hung up and sat in silence for a long while. Over the next few days, Raymond's life turned completely upside down. The video kept spreading. News stations picked up the story. Reporters showed up at his apartment building. They called him the piano driver. They called him the invisible virtuoso. They called him a lot of things that felt strange coming out of their mouths. Everyone wanted to know his story. Everyone wanted to understand how a man who drove cars for a living could play like someone who had trained at the finest conservatories in the world. Raymond did a few interviews because people kept asking. He told them about his mother. He told them about the accident. He told them about the 20 years of silence. And every time he told the story, he could see it hitting people right in the chest, because it was not just a story about music. It was a story about loss, about giving up, about finding the courage to try again. People connected to it in ways Raymond never expected. He got messages from all over the world, from people who had given up on their own dreams, from people who had lost someone they loved, from people who felt invisible in their own lives. They told him that his story gave them hope. They told him that watching him play made them want to pick up their own abandoned passions. They told him he had changed something inside them. Raymond did not know how to handle any of it. Had spent so long being nobody. Now suddenly he was somebody. It scared him more than he wanted to admit, but through all of it, Evelyn was there. She called him every single day, not as his boss, not as a CEO giving orders, just as a friend checking in. She asked how he was holding up. She asked if he needed anything. She asked what he was thinking about doing next. Raymond appreciated it more than he could say, because even with all the attention and all the opportunities coming his way, he still felt lost. He still was not sure what he wanted. One evening, about 2 weeks after the gala, Evelyn invited him to her office, not to work, just to talk. Raymond walked into the building where he used to drop her off every morning. But this time, he did not go to the parking garage. He went straight up to the top floor. Evelyn was waiting for him with coffee and a big smile. "Sit down," she said. "I want to show you something." She pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. Raymond opened it and saw a bunch of legal documents and financial statements. He had no idea what any of it meant. "What is this?" Evelyn leaned forward with excitement in her eyes. "I have been thinking a lot since that night about you, about your story, about all the people out there who have gifts. They are hiding talents. They gave up on dreams. They buried because life got too hard. Raymond nodded slowly. He knew exactly what she was talking about. I want to start a foundation. Evelyn continued, I want to call it the Second Chance Foundation. The mission is simple. We find people who had to walk away from their passions, artists and musicians, and writers and creators who lost their way, and we give them the resources and support they need to try again. We pay for lessons and equipment and studio time. We connect them with mentors and opportunities. We help them believe in themselves again. Raymond felt something stir in his chest. Why are you showing me this? Because I want you to run it. Raymond blinked. What you heard me. I have the money and the connections, but I do not have the heart. You do. You live this story. You understand what it feels like to lose everything and then find the courage to come back. You are the perfect person to lead this thing. Raymond sat back in his chair. He did not know what to say. A month ago, he was opening car doors. Now someone was asking him to run a foundation that could change lives. It felt impossible. It felt terrifying. It felt like exactly what his mother would have wanted him to do. Can I think about it? Of course, Evelyn smiled. Take all the time you need. But Raymond, Yad, do not hide anymore. You spent 20 years being invisible. That is over now. The world sees you, and it is time for you to see yourself. Raymond went home that night and did something he had not done since before the accident. Sat down at the old keyboard he kept in the corner of his apartment. One he had bought years ago, but never played. He placed his hands on the keys, and he started to play, not for a crowd, not for cameras, not for anyone but himself. He played until the sun came up, played until his fingers ached. He played until he remembered why he fell in love with music in the first place. And somewhere in those hours of playing, he made his decision. The next morning, he called Evelyn and told her yes, he would run the foundation. He would help other people find their way back to their dreams. He would use his story to light the path for others. 6 months later, the Second Chance Foundation officially launched. Raymond stood on a stage in front of hundreds of supporters and donors. Evelyn was in the front row, beaming with pride. He gave a speech about his mother, about the sacrifices she made, about the gift she gave him, about how he almost let it die. He told the crowd that everyone has something inside them worth sharing, a talent or a passion or a dream that makes them who they are. Told them that life has a way of burying those things under pain and responsibility and fear, but they never really go away. They just waiting for the moment when we are brave enough to dig them back up. At the end of his speech, Raymond sat down at a piano on the stage, the same Steinway from the gala. Evelyn had bought it and donated it to the foundation. Raymond looked out at the audience. He thought about how far he had come from the south side of Chicago to Carnegie Hall, from the hospital bed to the driver's seat, from invisible to seen. He placed his hands on the keys, and before he played, he spoke one last time. This is for my mother, the woman who believed in me before anyone else did, the woman who taught me that our gifts are not ours to keep, they belong to the world. Mama, if you can hear me, thank you. Thank you for never giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself. Then he played. The music filled the room like sunlight breaking through clouds after a long storming the front row. Evelyn wiped tears from her eyes, but she was smiling because she knew this was just the beginning. Over the next few years, the Second Chance Foundation helped thousands of people, musicians who had not touched their instruments in decades, painters who had put away their brushes, writers who had stopped believing their words mattered. One by one, they came back to life, and Raymond was there for every single one of them. He became more than a director. He became a symbol, living proof that it is never too late to start again. Sometimes reporters would ask him what he wanted his legacy to be. He always gave the same answer: I want people to know that being invisible is a choice. You can stay hidden if you want to. You can keep your gifts locked away where no one can see them. But the world needs what you have to offer: your pain, your story, your music, whatever it is that makes you who you are. Do not wait for someone to ask. Do not wait for permission. Just share it because you never know whose life you might change, including your own. Raymond would think about his mother when he said those words. He would think about her standing in the back of that church watching him play for the first time. He would think about her smile and her sacrifice and her unshakable belief in him, and he would know that she was still with him in every note he played, in every life he touched, in every second chance he helped create. She was there. She had always been there, and she always would be. That is the end of the story, but in another way, it is really just the beginning. Because somewhere out there right now, there is another person hiding their gift. Another person who thinks their dream is dead. Another person who has forgotten what they are capable of, and maybe, just maybe, they will hear this story and they will remember. They will sit down at the piano or pick up the paintbrush or open the notebook. They will take a deep breath and they will begin again, just like Raymond did, just like his mother always knew he would. Some stories do not really end. They just keep going past from one heart to another, lighting the way for everyone brave enough to follow.